The fact that gasoline has the ability to evaporate allows it to mix with the air in the combustion chamber and promote combustion. Remember, only air that's vaporized can burn. Right? Liquid fuel will not burn. If we didn't have the vapor on top of the gas, it wouldn't explode. Right? We're lighting the stuff. Think about when you hear about these lumber mills, right, that burn to the ground. It's because the sawdust is just like the fuel, right? The sawdust is floating through the air. It's mixing with the air that's around, and now you have air and you got fuel suspended together, and eventually to hit a point where a spark sets them off. Right? Liquid fuel doesn't burn. When you have carburetors back in the day, or a fuel injector that's dripping, right? If the fuel drips into the combustion chamber, the engine stumbles because it smothers it. It will not burn. It has to be turned into a vapor. Right? So there's some issues with volatility. If we have low volatility, meaning that the fuel will not vaporize, we get hard engine starts. Right? We get poor drivability, and the fuel economy during cold temperatures is pretty terrible. We get increased spark plug deposits and combustion chamber deposits, right? We get carbon. If you look at this stuff on the back of the valve, what ends up happening is that carbon then starts absorbing the fuel, and the fuel doesn't make it into the combustion chamber. So this is what happens when fuel does not have the ability to evaporate. The opposite is not good either, right? Fuel that vaporizes too easily can form vapor bubbles in high temperature. The vapor bubbles cause vapor lock. Vapor lock is the result of the fuel boiling in the fuel line or the fuel tank. Liquid is compressible, vapor is not. So fuel will not be pumped into the carburetor or the injectors. The whole reason why we run high fuel pressure, right? Before we got shut down in school, we saw 55 pounds of fuel pressure, 45 pounds, 65 pounds. The reason why we run it so high is the high pressure pushes down on the surface of the fuel and prevents it from boiling. That's why we run higher pressures in the fuel system, to keep them from causing vapor lock. Right? Fuel's kept under high pressure, as I just said. The higher the pressure raises the boiling point, reducing the chance of vapor lock. Signs of vapor lock: high evaporative emissions. The car's sitting in the garage and you smell the fuel. Well, that's the fuel vaporizing off the fuel out of the car into the air. Poor drivability when it gets hot because the fuel will boil. If it's boiling, we can't get it up to the engine. Poor fuel economy, right? Because the fuel's disappearing. And hard starting after a hot soak. You shut the car off, the car's sitting there, the fuel boils off, and now there's no fuel to start the car, so the car won't start. We used to have that problem with the C3 Corvettes, with the 454s and stuff. We'd have to wrap the fuel lines in insulation to keep the heat from boiling the fuel before it gets to the carburetor. Right, so now we have some measurements, and this stuff goes directly to your gas pump when you look at it. So we have an RVP characteristic called read vapor pressure. Right, this is the pressure of the vapor above the fuel when the fuel is at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Right, so the pressure is the pushing out of the fuel as it vaporizes. In the summer, we have warm ambient temperatures, and the gasoline vaporizes easily. The fuel system, right, fuel pump, carburetor, fuel injectors, etc., they're designed to operate with liquid gasoline. The volatility of summer-grade gasoline should be around 7 psi, right, up to about 10.5 RVP. Winter blend has to be changed because our temperatures are different and whatnot. So we have to increase the vapor pressure to permit the engine to start in cold weather. So winter grade gas turns into about 15 psi RVP. When you talk about the winter blend, right, the winter blend comes in somewhere around October, November, and usually our gas mileage goes down. That's the change that comes from it, right? It evaporates better at 15, and our gas mileage decreases. We have different things at high altitudes, right? High altitudes is less pressure. Water boils easier, so does fuel. So we alter the blends up there. We alter the evaporation rates of gasoline between all of these things. Right? Sulfur content. So sulfur is part of crude oil. Too high, and corrosion happens to the engine and the exhaust system. My Toyota Sienna has the original exhaust on it. Actually, I just replaced it at 250,000 miles. We used to change exhaust systems the first one lasted like 5 years, and then they went bad a year after that every year, right? So most of the sulfur is removed when it's refined because of this. So water is a product of combustion, right? We said that earlier. High temperatures make steam. The steam condenses back to water. The sulfur burned by the engine forms sulfur dioxide. When it mixes with the water, it causes sulfuric acid, right? And a terrible rotten egg smell, which you've all smelled also, right? So we get the sulfur out. We don't get the sulfur dioxide. We don't rot the exhaust apart with sulfuric acid.